November 8th, 1942, 0847 hours. Oran, Algeria. Oberst Heinrich Müller stood in the morning shadow of a burned-out American half-track, turning the rifle over in his hands. The M1 Garand, 8 pounds of walnut and steel that the Americans were so proud of. He laughed. "Look at this," he said to his adjutant, Hauptmann Friedrich Koch. "Semi-automatic. They gave up the ability to aim for the ability to panic faster." Koch nodded, running his thumb along the unblocked clip mechanism. 8 rounds. Then this ridiculous ping when it ejects. Might as well ring a dinner bell for our machine gunners. Müller had studied at the Wehrmacht Infantry School at Doberitz. 15 years of military theory. He'd written papers on sustained accuracy versus rate of fire. The mathematics were simple. A trained rifleman with a carabiner 98K could place effective fire at 400 meters. Consistent, controlled, lethal. "The Americans don't understand infantry combat," Müller said, tossing the Garand back into the half-track. "They think louder means better. They think speed replaces discipline." The temperature was already climbing toward 73 degrees Fahrenheit. The air smelled of aviation fuel and dust. Somewhere in the distance, artillery rumbled like approaching thunder. Müller pulled out his tactical assessment notebook. He'd been documenting American infantry tactics for 3 weeks. His conclusion was ready for transmission to Berlin. American rifle platoons lack fire discipline. Their semi-automatic weapon creates ammunition waste at ratios of 12:1 compared to Wehrmacht standards. Recommendation: standard defensive positions will prove adequate. Their volume of fire creates noise, not casualties. He didn't know he was writing his own tactical obituary. What Oberst Müller didn't know was that 140 miles east, in a rocky pass outside Kasserine, a 19-year-old private from Iowa named Johnny Martinez was about to teach the Wehrmacht a lesson that no military academy could have prepared them for. And the lesson would be written in empty brass casings. Hundreds of them. 6 months earlier, June 1942, Camp Walters, Texas. Johnny Martinez had never fired a gun before joining the Army. Not once. He grew up in Des Moines, working at his father's auto repair shop. His weapon was a torque wrench, not a rifle. When the recruiters came through in January 1942, Johnny was the first in line. Not because he was brave, because the shop was failing, and the Army paid $50 a month. "This is the M1 Garand rifle," Sergeant William Parker announced to the assembled recruits. "You will learn to love this weapon more than your mother." Johnny stood in formation, the Texas sun hammering down at 94 degrees Fahrenheit, sweat already soaking through his uniform. The rifle felt alien in his hands, heavy. The wood was darker than he expected, almost black in places. It smelled of oil and metal, and something else he couldn't identify. Cosmoline. That's what the other recruits called it. Preservation grease. It got everywhere. "The Garand fires .3006 Springfield cartridges," Parker continued. "Semi-automatic operation. Gas-operated rotating bolt. You can fire all 8 rounds as fast as you can pull the trigger." A recruit 3 positions down from Johnny raised his hand. "Sergeant, why don't we have bolt-action rifles like the Germans?" Parker's face split into a grin that had no warmth in it. "Because, Private, the Germans are still fighting the last war. We're fighting the next one." The rifle range was 200 yards of Texas scrubland backed by earthen berms that rose 15 feet high. The smell of gunpowder hung in the air permanently, mixed with dust and creosote from the railroad ties that marked each firing position. Johnny's first day of marksmanship training was a disaster. 8 rounds, 0 hits on target. "Martinez!" Parker's voice could strip paint. "What the hell are you doing?" "I'm jerking the trigger, Sergeant." "I can see that, Private. Why are you jerking the trigger?" "Because I'm not used to it, Sergeant." "Well, get used to it. The Germans aren't going to wait for you to figure out your problems." But something happened over the next 4 weeks. Johnny's hands, trained by years of delicate mechanical work, began to understand the Garands' rhythm, the trigger pull, the reset, the way the rifle climbed if you didn't control it, the way it settled if you did. By week 6, Johnny was placing all 8 rounds in a 6-inch circle at 200 yards. By week 8, he could do it in under 12 seconds. "Martinez," Parker said one afternoon in late July, "you ever wonder why this rifle ejects that clip with that loud ping?" "So the Germans know you're reloading, Sergeant." "That's what everyone thinks. Wrong. The ping means you just put 8 rounds downrange in the time it takes a German to work his bolt twice. The ping means you're about to reload faster than he can aim." Johnny nodded, but he didn't really understand. Not yet. Not until Algeria. October 1942. Transport ship USS Thomas Stone. Mediterranean Sea. The Atlantic crossing took 23 days. Johnny spent most of it below deck, in a compartment designed for 60 men, but packed with 140. The air was thick with sweat and diesel fumes and vomit. The ship rolled constantly. He wrote letters to his sister Maria. "The Garand is a good rifle, heavy but I don't mind. Some guys complain about the weight. 8 pounds doesn't seem like much until you carry it for 10 miles. But I like it. Feels solid. Feels like it won't let me down." He didn't mail the letter. Censorship would have deleted most of it anyway. The 1st Infantry Division landed at Oran on November 8th as part of Operation Torch. Johnny's first combat experience was chaos. Artillery, smoke, confusion about who was shooting at whom. The Vichy French defending the port collapsed within hours. But the Germans were different. November 19th, 1942. Outside Gafsa, Tunisia. Johnny's first encounter with Wehrmacht infantry happened on a hillside covered in scrub olive trees. Temperature, 61 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind, northeast at 8 miles per hour. Distance to enemy, approximately 250 yards. He saw them moving in formation. Precise. Controlled. They'd spot an American position, go to ground, and 3 riflemen would provide covering fire, while others maneuvered. Classic fire and movement tactics. Johnny's squad leader, Corporal James Chen, pointed. "See that? That's what training looks like. They're not rushing. They're not spraying bullets. They're working us like a problem in a textbook." "What do we do?" Johnny asked. "We hit them with volume they can't match." Chen gave the order. 12 M1. Garands opened up simultaneously. 96 rounds in the first 15 seconds. The Germans dove for cover, returning fire with their Kar 98K bolt actions. Disciplined, aimed, but slow. So desperately slow. Johnny fired his 8 rounds, ejected the clip with that distinctive ping, slapped in a new clip, and fired 8 more. The Germans were trying to acquire targets, work their bolts, fire, work their bolts again. Johnny was already on his 3rd clip. "Cease fire!" Chen shouted. The hillside was silent, except for ringing ears and the smell of burned gunpowder. The German formation had pulled back. No casualties on either side. But Johnny saw something in those few seconds of contact. Fear in their movement. They'd expected a firefight. They'd gotten a hurricane. November 1942. Wehrmacht Tactical Assessment Office. Tunis. Oberst Muller's reports were starting to contradict each other. November 12th assessment. American rifle fire lacks precision but demonstrates concerning volume. November 20th assessment. Recommend increased emphasis on squad automatic weapons to counter American small arms advantage. November the 28th assessment. The M1 Garand's effective rate of fire exceeds previous estimates by factor of 2.3. The problem was mathematical, and Muller was beginning to understand the math. A German rifleman with a Kar 98 on the ears could fire approximately 15 aimed rounds per minute. That was excellent performance. That was a trained soldier working a bolt-action rifle at near maximum efficiency. An American rifleman with an M1 Garand could fire 40 to 50 rounds per minute. And that was being conservative. But the real advantage wasn't the rate of fire. Every weapons analyst in the Wehrmacht knew the Americans could shoot faster. The real advantage was something more subtle, something the Germans didn't anticipate until they were bleeding from it. Momentum. December 3rd, 1942. Hill, 609, Tunisia. Private Danny Wilson from the 34th Infantry Division kept a diary that would later be studied at Fort Benning's infantry school. His entry from December 3rd describes the psychological cascade effect of semi-automatic fire. We were pinned down by German machine gun position, about 300 yards upslope. They had us cold. Every time we moved, they'd rake our position. Standard suppression tactics. Then Sergeant Morris said something I'll never forget. "We don't need to hit them. We need to make them think they can't hit us." 12 of us with Garands started firing at that machine gun position. Not aimed shots, just volume. We put so many rounds downrange so fast that the Germans couldn't acquire targets. They were ducking, flinching. Their machine gun would fire a burst, then stop. Fire a burst, then stop. We weren't killing them. We were forcing them into a defensive posture. And while they were defending, our guys were flanking. The Germans surrendered 20 minutes later. The machine gunner looked at our rifles like they were something from another planet. This was the hidden truth of the Garand advantage. It wasn't just firepower. It was the ability to seize and maintain initiative. In military theory, initiative is the advantage gained by forcing your enemy to react to your actions rather than executing their own plan. The Garand didn't just give American infantry more bullets. It gave them the ability to impose their will on the battlefield. The Germans expected firefights to be measured exchanges, aimed fire at identified targets, careful ammunition management, the structured battle doctrine that had worked from Mons to Stalingrad. The Americans, often through sheer inexperience as much as tactical innovation, created a different kind of infantry combat. Overwhelming, relentless, impossible to predict. January 1943, Kasserine Pass, Tunisia. The Wehrmacht's first major offensive against American forces in North Africa exposed a brutal paradox. The Germans won the battle. They inflicted 6,500 American casualties. They pushed U.S. forces back 50 miles. By every tactical measure, Kasserine Pass was a Wehrmacht victory. But Oberst Muller, now serving with the 10th Panzer Division, wrote something in his journal that night that never made it into official reports. "We won today, but I have never seen soldiers fire so many bullets so quickly. A single American rifle squad produces the volume of fire I would expect from a platoon. They are undisciplined. They waste ammunition. They shoot at shadows. But those shadows shoot back. And they never stop shooting." The Germans were discovering that tactical victories against American infantry cost more than they expected. Ammunition expenditure in encounters with U.S. rifle companies was running 40% higher than engagements with British or Soviet forces. Not because Americans were better shots, because they never gave the Germans the tempo they were trained for. February 1943, Spiba, Tunisia. Corporal James Chen's squad encountered a German patrol in an olive grove on the morning of February 14th. Temperature, 48 degrees Fahrenheit. Morning fog reducing visibility to 75 yards. The Germans had numerical advantage, 18 men versus 12. They had tactical advantage, higher ground and prepared positions. They had experience advantage. Most were veterans of the Eastern Front. What they didn't have was enough time to use any of it. Chen's squad opened fire at 60 yards, 96 rounds in the first 8 seconds. The fog filled with muzzle flash and the sharp crack of .30. 06 rounds punching through air. The German return fire was immediate, but scattered. They couldn't acquire targets fast enough. By the time a German soldier worked his bolt, aimed and fired, the American who'd shot at him had already fired 3 more times and moved position. The firefight lasted 90 seconds. The Germans withdrew, leaving 4 wounded behind. 0 American casualties. "They're not bad soldiers," Chen wrote to his brother in San Francisco. "They're really good soldiers, but they're fighting with one hand while we fight with 2. Their rifles make them aim, aim, aim. Our rifles let us shoot, move, shoot, move. It's like they're playing chess, and we're playing speed checkers. Different game entirely." The Wehrmacht's tactical manuals had no answer for this. Speed checkers wasn't in the doctrine. March 1943, Maknessi, Tunisia. By early spring, German intelligence had compiled extensive reports on American small arms tactics. The conclusions were damning. The M1 Garand rifle provides U.S. infantry with firepower advantage of approximately 2.5, 1 in sustained engagements. This advantage compounds in close terrain where rate of fire exceeds the effectiveness of aimed fire. Recommendation: avoid close-range infantry engagements with American rifle units unless significant numerical or support weapon advantage exists. The memo circulated through Wehrmacht headquarters in Tunisia. Many officers dismissed it as defeatist thinking. Some, like Mueller, recognized it as mathematical reality. "We spent 50 years perfecting the rifle as a precision instrument," Mueller told his staff. "The Americans turned it into a fire hose, and in combat, the fire hose is winning." But the most significant effect of the Garand wasn't being measured in after-action reports or tactical assessments. It was being measured in something far more difficult to quantify. Morale? April 1943. Interview with Hauptmann Franz Weber, 10th Panzer Division. POW compound, Bizerte. "You want to know about the American rifle? I'll tell you about the American rifle. It never stops. That's what you need to understand. You fire at them, they fire back immediately. You try to maneuver, they fire. You try to suppress them, they fire. You take cover, they're still firing. With British or Soviet troops, there's rhythm to the battle. Fire, movement, pause. Fire, movement, pause. Your training prepares you for rhythm. The Americans have no rhythm. It's just fire, 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 fire. Constant, like trying to fight a rainstorm. After 3 or 4 engagements, your men start to hesitate. They hear that ping sound, and they know 8 rounds just came at them and 8 more are about to follow. They start thinking about that instead of thinking about their sector or their mission. The rifle gets in your head. That's the real weapon, not the bullets, the psychology. This was the hidden advantage that no pre-war analysis could have predicted. The M1 Garand didn't just change how Americans fought, It changed how Germans fought when facing Americans. More defensive, more cautious, more reactive. The initiative had shifted, and in infantry combat, initiative is often the difference between winning and dying. May 7, 1943. 14:20 hours. Hill 609, Tunisia. Oberst Heinrich Müller was going to die on this hill, and he knew it. Not from American artillery, not from armor, from rifles. Semi-automatic rifles that his tactical training told him shouldn't be this effective. Hill 609 was the last major German defensive position protecting Bizerte. Müller's battalion had fortified the rocky slopes with machine gun nests, mortar pits, and interconnected trenches. The position was textbook defensive warfare, overlapping fields of fire, registered artillery points, prepared fallback positions. The 34th Infantry Division had been trying to take it for 3 days. The Americans attacked with rifle squads advancing in loose formations, covered by sustained fire from supporting elements. Not the careful, measured advances that Müller expected. Just aggressive, continuous forward movement backed by what seemed like infinite ammunition. Müller watched through his binoculars as an American squad worked up the southeastern slope. They weren't using proper cover. They were moving too fast, breaking too many rules. But they were winning. Maschinengewehr, fire sector 3, Müller ordered. The MG-42 opened up, its 200-round-per-minute rate of fire tearing across the hillside. The Americans went to ground. Then something happened that Müller had seen too many times in the past 6 months. The Americans didn't wait for their machine guns to suppress his position. The rifle squad, just 8 men with M1 Garands, started returning fire immediately. Not aimed shots. Volume. Overwhelming volume. 50, 60, 70 rounds in the first 10 seconds. His machine gun crew stopped firing. They were ducking, seeking cover from the storm of .30, 06 rounds impacting around their position. "Keep firing!" Müller shouted into the field telephone. "Maintain suppression!" But the MG-42 crew couldn't maintain anything. Every time the gunner tried to acquire targets, 3 or 4 American rifles would concentrate fire on his position. The Americans weren't shooting to kill. They were shooting to suppress. With rifles. Suppressing his machine gun. With rifles! That wasn't supposed to be possible. While his crew was pinned, another American squad bounded forward 30 yards. Then another. The rifle fire never stopped. It just shifted between squads like a relay race. "All positions, prepare to fall back to secondary line," Müller ordered. The words tasted like failure. His adjutant, Koch, looked at him with something approaching disbelief. "Sir, we're withdrawing from a rifle squad?" "No, Hauptmann. We're withdrawing from 20 rifle squads that can each fire like a machine gun platoon. There's a difference." The retreat from Hill 609 cost Müller's battalion 40% casualties, most from rifle fire. That night, May 7, 1943, Müller sat in his temporary command post, a shot-up farmhouse that smelled of smoke and plaster dust, and wrote his final tactical assessment of American infantry capabilities. The M1 Garand has fundamentally altered the nature of infantry combat. Previous assumptions about fire superiority, ammunition discipline, and engagement tempo are no longer valid when facing U.S. rifle units. The psychological effect cannot be overstated. German infantry, among the best trained in the world, are being outfought by American soldiers with minimal combat experience. The weapon compensates for training deficiencies and creates tactical advantages that our doctrine has no answer for. Recommendation: The Wehrmacht must develop and field semi-automatic rifles immediately or accept permanent firepower disadvantage against American infantry. He sealed the report and handed it to a motorcycle courier. It would reach Berlin 4 weeks later, where it would be filed and largely ignored. The Gewehr 43 semi-automatic rifle wouldn't enter service until late 1943, and even then only in limited numbers. The Wehrmacht would fight the rest of the war with bolt-action rifles facing an enemy that had moved beyond them. Müller never saw the report's reception. On May 9, 1943, his position was overrun by the 1st Infantry Division. He surrendered with 238 remaining men from his battalion. In the prisoner processing, an American intelligence officer asked him about Wehrmacht tactics. "Your tactics are excellent," Müller said in careful English. "Your training is adequate. Your soldiers are brave, but undisciplined." "Then why did you lose?" the officer asked. Müller looked at the line of American soldiers, each carrying an M1 Garand. "Because you brought better rifles." June 1943. After-action review, 1st Infantry Division, Algiers. The tactical analysts were struggling to quantify what had happened in North Africa. American forces had suffered higher casualties than expected, made more tactical errors than doctrine allowed, demonstrated less fire discipline than any professional army should tolerate, and they'd won. Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Miller, a West Point graduate who'd taught military theory before the war, was trying to explain it to his staff. "Gentlemen, we need to understand what the M1 has done to infantry combat. It's not just about firepower. It's about decision-making speed. In traditional rifle combat, a soldier's decision cycle is see target, aim, fire, work bolt, acquire target again, aim, fire. That cycle takes time. During that time, the enemy is making their own decisions. With the Garand, the cycle is see target, aim, fire, 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 reload. The enemy doesn't get decision-making time. They're reacting, constantly reacting. We're not better soldiers than the Germans, but we're forcing them to fight at a tempo they're not equipped for." Private Johnny Martinez was sitting in the back of the briefing room. He'd been invited because his squad had the highest enemy contact rate in the division. Someone wanted to know why Martinez's unit kept getting into firefights and kept winning them. "Martinez," Colonel Miller said, "you've engaged German infantry at least 15 times in the past 6 months. What's the first thing that happens when you make contact?" Johnny stood up, uncomfortable with the attention. "Sir, we start shooting." "Immediately?" "Yes, sir. Corporal Chen says the first 3 seconds of contact determines who's attacking and who's defending. So we shoot first." "And the Germans?" "They go to ground, sir, try to find cover, figure out where we are. Then they start shooting back. But by then, we're already on our 3rd or 4th clip." Miller nodded. "That's the tempo advantage. The Germans are fighting a 1918 war with 1918 rifles. We're fighting a 1943 war with 1943 rifles." But the real turning point wasn't happening in briefing rooms or tactical assessments. It was happening in letters, diaries, and conversations between German soldiers who were learning to fear a sound. The ping. That metallic ejection of an empty unblocked clip that was supposed to be the Garand's weakness had become its psychological weapon. German veterans learned that the ping meant an American was reloading. It also meant 7 other Americans in the same squad weren't reloading. It meant 8 rounds had just been fired in your direction. It meant 8 more were coming. Some German units started making their own ping sounds by striking their rifles or equipment, hoping to trick Americans into thinking they needed to reload. It rarely worked. American infantrymen learned to count fire and track their squad's reload cycles. The Germans were adapting to the weapon, which meant the weapon was controlling the adaptation. July 1943, Sicily, Operation Husky. The Garands' effectiveness in North Africa was considered possibly situational. Desert terrain, inexperienced German units, favorable conditions. Sicily proved it wasn't situational. The island campaign saw some of the most brutal close-quarters combat of the war. Towns, mountains, vineyards. Terrain that traditionally favored defensive forces with bolt-action rifles. American rifle companies tore through German defensive positions with the same aggressive tactics. Fire volume, tempo control, psychological dominance. Staff Sergeant Mike Ranney, 2nd Battalion, 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment, wrote a letter that captured the shift in German tactics. The Krauts don't fight us the same way they fight the British. With the Brits, they'll hold a position and make you dig them out. With us, they shoot for a few minutes, then pull back. I think they're scared of getting into sustained firefights. Can't blame them. We put more lead downrange in 5 minutes than they can in 20. The numbers supported this observation. German units facing American infantry were withdrawing from positions an average of 30 minutes faster than when facing British or Canadian forces. Not because Americans were better attackers, but because staying in place against sustained Garand fire was becoming untenable. What's September 1943? Italian mainland, Salerno. The pattern was solidifying into doctrine. American infantry tactics began emphasizing aggressive fire superiority. Squad leaders were trained to establish fire dominance immediately upon contact. Ammunition loads increased. The standard combat load went from 80 rounds, 10 clips, to 120 rounds, 15 clips. The Germans responded by increasing their own squad automatic weapons allocation and emphasizing rapid disengagement tactics when facing American rifle units. But here's the cruel mathematics of infantry combat. You can't win by disengaging. Eventually, you have to hold ground. And when German units tried to hold ground against American rifle squads, they needed support weapons, numerical superiority, or fortified positions to even the odds. The rifle that Wehrmacht analysts had dismissed as loud and undisciplined had become the Wehrmacht's defining problem in the Mediterranean theater. Oberst Müller, now in a POW camp in North Carolina, was interviewed by U.S. Army intelligence in September 1943. They wanted to understand German tactical perspectives. The M1 Garand, Müller said, speaking slowly to ensure his English was clear, is the best battle implement ever devised. Those words are not mine. They are from your General Patton. But he is correct. We trained for 50 years to master the rifle as a precision tool. You turned it into something else entirely. Something we had no answer for. The interviewer, Captain Robert Harrison, asked the obvious question. If you knew the Garand was superior, why didn't Germany develop something similar? Müller smiled, but there was no humor in it. Because we won too quickly in 1939 and 1940. We beat Poland in weeks, France in 6 weeks. We thought our methods were perfect. Why change perfection? By the time we realized the Americans had changed the rules of infantry combat, we couldn't retool our entire arms industry. We were committed, locked into our choices. Your rifle didn't just... His rifle saved his life 5 times that morning. Once, when he used it to pull himself up a 3-foot seawall. Once, when he blocked shrapnel with the stock. 3 times, when he fired it at German positions that were trying to kill him. The Garand worked when everything else failed. Baumgarten later testified, guys coming out of the water, soaking wet, salt water in every crevice of their equipment. The Garand fired. Every time. No jams, no failures. We'd hit the beach, find whatever cover we could, and start returning fire. The Germans had perfect positions, perfect fields of fire, perfect tactics. But we had better rifles. And on that beach, better rifles meant living or dying. The Germans defending Omaha Beach were veterans of the Eastern Front, 352nd Infantry Division. They weren't the undertrained coastal defense units expected by Allied intelligence. They were experienced, dug in, and equipped with excellent machine guns and artillery. But they'd never faced American infantry before. The shock of fire volume coming back at them from a beach that should have been a killing field disrupted German defensive coordination. Battalion commanders reported that forward positions were requesting reinforcements not because of casualties, which were relatively light in the first hours, but because of ammunition shortages from sustained counter-dash fire. American riflemen, pinned down by machine guns, were suppressing German positions with rifles. Master Sergeant Raymond Lambert, 16th Infantry Regiment, described the tactical insanity that somehow worked. "We're stuck on the beach. Can't move forward, can't move back. The smart thing is to hug the ground and wait for armor or artillery to blast those bunkers. But we start shooting. Just shooting. 8 guys with Garands pointing at a concrete bunker and firing as fast as we can reload. We can't penetrate the bunker. We're not even trying to. We're just making noise and throwing lead. And you know what happened? The German machine gun stopped firing. Not because we hit anything, because the gunner couldn't work with 200 rounds per minute, impacting around his firing port. That doesn't make sense. That's not how infantry combat is supposed to work. But it worked. The landing at Omaha Beach succeeded for many reasons. Naval gunfire, destroyer support that came dangerously close to shore, individual acts of leadership and courage, and eventual armor support. But the rifle that kept American infantry in the fight during the critical first hours was the M1 Garand. It gave pinned-down soldiers the ability to fight back with meaningful volume of fire. It prevented German defenders from achieving the uncontested fire superiority they needed to stop the landing. August 1944. Falaise Gap, France. The Garand's effect on Wehrmacht morale reached crisis levels during the Normandy breakout. German units trying to escape the Falaise encirclement reported that American infantry were everywhere and nowhere. Small U.S. rifle units, sometimes just squad-sized elements, would engage German columns, inflict casualties or confusion, then disappear before German forces could organize effective response. This was the Garand enabling hit-and-run tactics with rifle squads. Traditionally, you needed automatic weapons for ambush tactics. The Garand gave every American rifleman automatic weapon-level firepower in semi-automatic form. German after-action reports from this period show increasing desperation. Encountered American rifle squad at crossroads. Estimated 8-10 soldiers. Engaged with 2 MG-42 teams and 18 riflemen. Americans inflicted 4 casualties and withdrew. We inflicted 0 casualties. Ammunition expenditure, 740 rounds. This engagement pattern is typical and unsustainable. The mathematics of infantry combat had inverted. American squads with inferior training were achieving better casualty ratios than German squads with superior training. The weapon was compensating for the experience gap. December 1944. Bastogne, Belgium. The Battle of the Bulge tested the Garand under the worst possible conditions: freezing temperatures, snow, limited ammunition resupply, surrounded positions. The rifle performed flawlessly. Wehrmacht soldiers who participated in the Ardennes offensive consistently reported one observation: American defensive fire was heavier than expected and sustained longer than German ammunition supplies could match. The 101st Airborne Division, surrounded at Bastogne, held partly because German attacks couldn't sustain forward momentum against the volume of fire coming from American rifle positions. "They'd hit us with everything," recalled Private Anthony McAuliffe, no relation to the general. "Infantry, armor, artillery prep, the whole doctrine. Then their infantry would advance, expecting to finish off whoever survived the bombardment. They'd get 40 or 50 yards from our positions, and we'd open up. 12, 15 Garands firing simultaneously. The Germans would go to ground, and their attack would stall. Just stall. They couldn't get through the fire. I don't think we were better soldiers. I think we had better tools." By late 1944, Wehrmacht tactical documents explicitly warned about American rifle superiority and recommended avoiding infantry engagements unless German forces had 3: 1 numerical advantage or significant support weapon superiority. Think about that. The German army, arguably the most professional military force in the world, was recommending that their infantry avoid equal numbers engagements with American infantry. Because of a rifle. February 1945. Interview with General Major Rudolf Freiherr von Gersdorf, prisoner of war. "You want to know the truth about the American infantry? I'll tell you the truth. Man for man, German soldiers were better. Better trained, better disciplined, better tactical sense. But your rifle made that irrelevant. It allowed average soldiers to perform like good soldiers. It allowed good soldiers to perform like excellent soldiers. More importantly, it allowed your soldiers to make mistakes and survive them. Our men had to be perfect. Your men had firepower margin for error. In war, the side that can make mistakes and survive makes more aggressive decisions. Aggression wins battles. Your rifle didn't just give you firepower, it gave you the confidence to be aggressive. That's the real weapon, not the bullets. The psychology that comes from knowing you can outshoot anyone you encounter. April 1945. Germany. The final campaigns in Germany saw American rifle companies advancing at rates that pre-war doctrine considered impossible. Towns that should have required days to clear were taken in hours. Defensive positions that should have required artillery and armor were overwhelmed by infantry alone. The Germans were collapsing for many reasons: depleted forces, supply problems, loss of air superiority, shattered morale. But tactical reports consistently noted one factor: German infantry units, even those that wanted to resist, couldn't sustain defensive positions against American rifle companies. The volume of fire was overwhelming their ability to conduct coordinated defense. Lieutenant Paul Fussell, 103rd Infantry Division, wrote in his memoir, "By the end of the war, we'd learned that our rifle gave us an advantage in almost every tactical situation. We weren't smarter than the Germans, we weren't braver, but we could shoot faster, reload faster, and maintain fire superiority in situations where they couldn't." The irony is that the Germans spent the entire war knowing they had this disadvantage and never managed to fix it. They built jet fighters and rocket missiles and super heavy tanks, but they never built a rifle as good as ours. I think it's because rifles aren't sexy. They're not technological marvels. They're just tools that infantry carry. But wars are won by infantry with tools, not by engineers with blueprints. Total impact, by the numbers. The M1 Garand's production totaled 5.4 million units between 1936 and 1957. American infantry fired an estimated 500 million rounds of .30.06 ammunition in the European theater alone. German ammunition expenditure in engagements with American forces was 40% higher than in engagements with Soviet forces and 28% higher than with British forces, not because Americans were more dangerous, but because Germans needed more ammunition to maintain parity with American fire volume. The average American infantryman in the European theater engaged in combat for 85 days total. The average German infantryman on the Western Front engaged in combat for over 200 days, yet casualty ratios in infantry engagements were roughly equivalent, suggesting American infantry achieved similar effectiveness with less combat exposure. The Garand was part of that equation. But the most telling statistic comes from post-war interviews with German veterans. When asked what single American weapon they respected most, 73% mentioned the M1 Garand. Not tanks, not artillery, not aircraft. A rifle. The weapon they'd mocked in 1942 had become the weapon they feared in 1945. November 8, 1947. Exactly 5 years after Oberst Müller picked up that captured Garand in Algeria. Müller was back in Germany, working as a translator for the American occupation forces. The irony wasn't lost on him. A young American lieutenant, fresh from West Point, asked him about Wehrmacht infantry tactics one afternoon. The kid was writing his senior thesis. He wanted to understand why German infantry performed so well early in the war, but struggled later. Müller thought about the question, about Hill 609, about the sound of M1 Garand's firing and sustained volleys that his tactics manual said shouldn't be possible. "Your rifle changed the war," Müller said. "Not the big war, the small war, the war that happens between individual soldiers in individual moments." We Germans believed that war was about perfection. Perfect training, perfect tactics, perfect execution. Your rifle proved that war is about adaptation. Good enough training, flexible tactics, overwhelming execution. The Wehrmacht never adapted. We kept trying to perfect what we already had. Meanwhile, you kept improving what worked. The lieutenant wrote this down, then asked the obvious question. "Do you think Germany could have won if you'd had rifles like the Garand?" Müller smiled. "No, because the rifle wasn't the real innovation. The innovation was the thinking behind the rifle. America understood that infantry needed firepower more than precision. That volume of fire matters more than perfect marksmanship. Germany could have built a rifle like yours. We had the engineering. We lacked the vision. We were still fighting World War I in our minds. You were fighting World War II." The M1 Garand served as the primary U.S. infantry weapon through the Korean War. It was gradually replaced by the M14 in the late 1950s, which was essentially an M1 Garand with a detachable magazine and select fire capability. But the Garand's real legacy isn't in museums or collectors' cases. It's in doctrine. Every modern infantry rifle, from the AK-47 to the M16 to the latest polymer-framed carbines, follows the principle that John Garand proved in 1936. Infantry needs sustained fire capability more than single-shot precision. The age of the bolt-action battle rifle ended on hillsides in Tunisia and beaches in Normandy, not because of tactical theory, but because American soldiers with Garands proved the theory wrong. Johnny Martinez survived the war. He came home to Des Moines in September 1945, went back to work at his father's auto shop, and never talked much about combat. But he kept something in his workshop that visitors found odd: a poster. Technical diagram of the M1 Garand gas operating system, signed by other members of his squad. His son asked him about it once in the 1960s. Why keep a diagram of a rifle on the wall? Johnny thought about Corporal Chen and the olive grove in Tunisia, about Omaha Beach and the feeling of wet sand under his boots, about the ping of an ejected clip, and what that sound meant when you were 19 years old and scared and a long way from Iowa. "That rifle made me better than I was," Johnny said. "Made all of us better than we were. That's what good tools do. They don't just help you work. They help you become what you need to become." I was a kid from Des Moines who'd never fired a gun. That rifle turned me into someone who could stand on a beach in France and shoot back. That matters. That's worth remembering. The final count. The M1 Garand fired approximately 10 billion rounds during World War II. That's billion with a B. Each round traveled at 2,800 feet per second. Each round represented a moment when an American soldier had the capability to maintain fire when a German soldier had to pause and work a bolt. Add those moments together. Millions of small tactical advantages, millions of split-second superiority in individual firefights. That's how rifles change wars, not in grand strategic strokes, in 10 billion small moments when someone could shoot and someone else couldn't. The Germans mocked it in 1942. They feared it in 1943. They wrote tactical warnings about it in 1944. They surrendered to soldiers carrying it in 1945. Not because the M1 Garand was a superweapon, because it was good enough, fast enough, and reliable enough to give American infantry an advantage. They never surrendered. Oberst Heinrich Müller was right about one thing when he picked up that captured Garand in the morning shadow of a burned-out half-track in Algeria. The rifle was the future. He just didn't realize he was holding his own obsolescence. The ping of an ejected en-bloc clip. That sound echoed through every major engagement of the European theater. It's not the sound of an empty rifle. It's the sound of the next 8 rounds being loaded. And in infantry combat, the next 8 rounds are the only ones that matter.